Welcome to the Ask SQL Family podcast. This is episode number 16, and our guest today is Chris Webb.
Chris Webb is independent consultant specializing in analysis services, MDX, Power Pivot, DAX, Power Query and Power BI in general. He has been blogging about Microsoft BI for over 10 years and racked up over 1,000 posts on his blog. Also, he speaks at a number of conferences, including SQLBits, the PAS Summit, the PAS BA Conference, SQL Saturdays, and user groups. The author of Power Query for Power BI and Excel, a co-author of few other books, and also he co-authored the white paper for Microsoft. Hi Chris, we are sitting in this fantastic venue, I think,
yes.
during the SQL Relay, Data Relay right now.
Yes, I know.
And
it's difficult to say. I keep wanting to call it SQL Relay, but no, it's Data Relay.
Absolutely, yeah. So you just finished your session, your 55-minute session about M language, yeah?
Yes, the difficult thing about doing sessions that are 55 minutes is that I naturally think in 1 hour sessions. So there are about 2 slides at the end that I was able to very skillfully cut out at the last minute.
Yeah.
Anything that isn't an exact hour session, if you're a kind of experienced speaker, is very, very off-putting. But you manage it anyway. It's not a massive problem.
Yeah, exactly. So how do you feel? How did you feel at that room, at that screen? It was very big screen. We are in the cinema, yeah?
Yeah, I know. It's to be honest, I'm surprised that more events don't take place at cinemas. I've done a few, and having that big screen as an attendee is really amazing. I'm a heavy user of Zoomit, and actually, I still want to use Zoomit to point things out, but actually you don't even need Zoomit because everything is so big. And for an attendee, also the comfortable seats, the decent acoustics, it makes a massive difference. The one thing I would say though, as a presenter, having a big screen makes it actually a little bit more difficult because
Why?
Because occasionally I want to see what is on the screen, not on my laptop screen.
So you extend the screen?
No, I duplicate. But
okay.
if I'm standing out at the front, I might look back to see what's on screen, and actually you can't see. And also, it's kind of nice to see whether the attendees can actually see the thing you're pointing out. And from the big screen, I couldn't actually see anything that was on the big screen because I was too close to it.
Yeah, sure.
But that's a kind of minor thing. From an attendee's point of view, having a gigantic screen is absolutely amazing, and it works so well. And they're great venues as well. So
yeah, absolutely. It's the best I've ever seen so far, at least. So I attached to this blog post the picture I've made during your session, so the readers will be able to see how big screen was.
Yeah.
Okay, let's back to the beginning. Could you tell me what's your name and where do you live?
So my name's Chris Webb. I live in the UK, just northwest of London, in a small town called Amersham. I'm a consultant and trainer. I'm kind of self-employed. I'm a one-man company, and I travel all around the UK and Europe doing training and consultancy, mostly nowadays on Power BI. In the past, more analysis services. When I first started out, I was a purely analysis services multi-dimensional person, and then Tabular and Power Pivot and Power BI came along, so moved with the times.
Yeah, I've kept this question on the later time, but when we're talking about the SSAS, so I saw this tweet from you that you started basically at the beginning of the SSAS. When it appeared, it was 20
years ago. Yes,
yeah.
1998. Obviously, I was very, very, very young in 1998. But yeah, it was kind of in my very first IT job. I was doing VB6 programming, and then I got put on a project where we were evaluating OLAP services at the beta stage. So I was working for a company who'd actually already got lots of experience with various different OLAP tools. They'd built their own OLAP tools for delivering data, and they were very sophisticated. They had lots of very complex requirements. So as a result, we spent a long time evaluating OLAP services, learning it, learning how to recreate lots of complex calculations, which is how I learned MDX. And then once I'd done that, I suddenly realized, hey, now I know MDX and OLAP services, which then became analysis services, which then became very, very popular, and that's been my career pretty much ever since.
Yeah, so you started learning MDX from the beginning, basically.
Yeah,
so you
back
are
in the
really expert in that language.
Back with the first betas, and it's surprising how little things have changed. The fundamentals of the language are basically the same as they were 20 years ago. It's not very fashionable anymore. Now everybody's into DAX and M and other more, and Python and all of the other cool things. But I mean, even though I spend the majority of my time doing Power BI, I still reckon I spend about 20-30% of my time doing analysis services, multidimensional and MDX stuff.
Yeah, let's focus on that one and repeat what as you mentioned. You have your own consultancy company, and what are you doing for a living exactly? What are you doing in this company? You mentioned that you train a lot of. What else?
So I'm a one-man band. I don't do long contracts. The longest I'll ever spend with a customer at a time is about 5 days.
Wow.
And probably on average, my average engagement is about two days, I would say. And literally, people will contact me and say, hey Chris, I've got a problem with Power BI or analysis services, or I've got a shopping list of problems. Can you come in for a day or two and we can work through them and you can tell me the answer? So I don't build stuff for people. I come in and kind of help them build stuff. And at the same time, people will say, oh, we need some Power BI training or analysis services training for the team. Can you come in and run a private course and cover these subjects? So I do kind of customized private training courses for people as well.
Cool.
And there's a lot of overlap. Sometimes the consultancy I do turns into training, because if you're explaining how to solve a bit of problem, you've got to explain the concepts.
Yeah. So you're covering the SSIS, tabular, multidimensional, Power BI, M language. Did I miss something?
Well, I suppose I do Excel and Power Pivot and Power Query and things like that. And now that Power Query is being included in Flow, maybe I'll do a bit of Flow, but I wouldn't paint myself as a Flow expert by any means. But yeah, anything where that basic analysis services engine and the Power Query engine is being used, I'll go there and work.
Does it look promising? I mean, the M language in Power Query M language in Microsoft Flow.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's going to be all kinds of fun things that you can do with it. I mean, at the moment it's very, very limited. At the moment, the Power Query integration is limited to SQL Server data sources. So you can connect to a SQL Server database, generate an M query, get some data out, and then do whatever you can do in Flow. So I wrote a blog post recently where it showed how you could run a query and then save it as a CSV file in OneDrive for Business. And actually, a lot of people want to do that kind of thing. I've seen numerous times situations where people basically want to use Power Query in Excel or Power Query in Power BI Desktop to just do one of those kind of standard CSV data dumps because they need a CSV file for some other system. And actually doing this in Flow makes an awful lot more sense because you can save directly to the CSV file and you can set it to run on a schedule. So
and it's completely easy without any line of code. Yeah.
Exactly.
What do you think? What is the future of typical SSIS multidimensional or tabular model, maybe? Because currently we have
you ask all the controversial questions,
I know.
Don't you? Okay, so in the near future, and I can say this because Aminetz has said it on Twitter, multidimensional will be going to the cloud. Now, the way things are at the moment, we have Power BI and we have Azure Analysis Services. And based on the announcements that have been made at Ignite recently, Azure Analysis Services is not necessarily going away, but it looks like all of the interesting stuff is being put into Power BI Premium. I mean, from a technical point of view, there isn't really that much difference between Azure Analysis Services and the engine behind Power BI Premium. So from Microsoft's point of view, I can see why it's a bit stupid really to have Power BI Premium and Azure Analysis Services, and why it makes a lot more sense to simplify the story and just say, well, we'll just consolidate with Power BI Premium. It's also clear that more and more features are being added to Power BI Premium. It looks like Power BI Premium is basically going to be the kind of one-stop shop where an enterprise can pay a set amount of money a month and get a kind of full stack Microsoft BI implementation, because we're getting reporting services in the cloud as a feature of Power BI Premium. And I would guess that when Analysis Services Multidimensional comes to the cloud, it will come as a feature of Power BI Premium.
Yeah.
That doesn't necessarily mean all these features will always be limited to Power BI Premium. The way I understand it, for technical reasons, it's easier to put them in Premium first, and then eventually these features will be coming to Pro in some shape or form. But it seems like if you're an enterprise anyway, you would want to buy Premium for various other reasons as well.
Yeah, sure.
So I guess that's where things are going. I mean, we've had 20 years of Analysis Services, and it's still very, very strong and healthy as a platform. It's just that nowadays it's kind of hidden inside Power BI rather than its own branded thing so much.
Yeah.
But the Analysis Services dev team is still doing amazing work. Microsoft is still very, very serious about it. It's just now people don't even know it's Analysis Services.
Yeah, true. Exactly. They basically don't know what is the behind the scenes.
Exactly.
I'm observing that more and more companies are interested in Power BI or trying to adopt the Power BI in the enterprise. Yeah. How it looks like it from your perspective?
I mean, from my point of view, it's absolutely crazy. I mean, I've never seen any Microsoft product that I've worked with become so popular as Power BI. Now, Power BI has obviously been around in lots of different shapes and forms for many years. It's really, since it got rebooted, 3 years ago, in the shape and form that it is today, with Power BI Desktop and the separate Power BI service, that was the point where everything really kicked off. And since then, the number of companies that I've seen who are just adopting Power BI, partly because of the price, because it's cost effective, partly because it's native cloud, which is also great and has obviously lots of advantages, and partly because it's a really good BI platform. And Microsoft
and developing so fast.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think we're all, for people who've worked in the Microsoft space, we've all been used to Microsoft in the past wasting its money on crazy stuff like the Zune or buying Nokia, which obviously did it no good whatsoever. And then the products that we were actually working with, that people were buying, never seemed to have quite enough love or money spent on them. I guess now, in the age of Satya, sanity has returned. Microsoft is spending its vast amounts of money on Power BI, and as a result, Power BI is just growing and growing and getting better and better at an amazing rate. And the end result is customers see this, they love what they've got, and they just want to buy.
Fantastic.
I mean, in a way, there's actually a real downside to this, in that Power BI is moving so quickly. If you're somebody who works with Power BI like me, you just end up being completely overwhelmed. Every month, every week, there is something new, some substantial new feature to learn.
There's a bunch of new features,
and you just can't keep up. You feel like you go away on holiday for a month, and suddenly the world has completely changed, and you've been left behind. So in a way, it can be a little bit stressful trying to keep up with the massive pace of change.
Every month, the Power BI team published a new post about the last month changes.
Yeah, exactly.
So.
In a way, I think it's interesting because to go back to 20 years ago, I can still remember around the year 2000. That was the point where there were still people who could claim to be complete SQL Server platform experts. They knew everything there was about every single aspect of the SQL Server. But then after that, and especially with SQL Server 2005, the world split into people who knew the relational engine, people who knew analysis services, people who knew integration services. You couldn't possibly be an expert on everything.
Yeah.
And I think actually Power BI is getting like that. It's getting so big and so rich and mature that there will be, already you see Marco and Alberto, who are the DAX and modeling experts.
Yeah.
I would like to think that if somebody was looking for help with Power Query and M, they might come to me. There are going to be people who are experts on different bits of Power BI.
Yes.
Nobody is going to be great at the whole thing.
So you're even thinking about the Power BI, only the Power BI, like I was thinking about the other areas, like, currently only the SQL engine. It's not only the SQL engine, like you mentioned previously, we had we still have integration service, reporting services, but now we have even more in Azure, like Azure Data Factory, Data Lake, Databricks, and etc. etc. There's so much new things that you need to get and understand. Yeah.
Exactly, and I think basic Power BI is a skill is something that anyone can learn. I mean, anybody with an IT background will be able to pick up Power BI very easily, and that's the magic. That's the point of it almost. It's meant for non-IT users, and that's definitely true. But for people who want to be Power BI experts, there's more in Power BI than any one person I think can ever truly learn or be good at.
Yeah, in terms of Power BI and very popular Devops approach, how the customers can adopt Devops for Power BI reports deployment and why they still can't do that?
Well, yeah, I mean the story about managing Power BI report deployments is not good. The good thing is that Microsoft knows and understands that this is a problem, and they're working on the solution. So, for example, again in the last month, what we've seen is there's a very well-known tool called BISM Normalizer that analysis services tabular developers have used for a long time, and that has now been converted for use with Power BI. Mac Software, who do lots of custom visuals with Power BI, I think have been recruited by Microsoft and have created a version of BISM Normalizer that works with Power BI. So we'll be able to do, for example, partial deployments and compares and things like that. Also, something else that has been worked on quite a lot by the Power BI team are all of the PowerShell commandlets for Power BI, which will allow us to move different Power BI components like reports and data sets from one workspace to another. So the story is getting better and better. I wouldn't say that it's there yet, and I would also say that a lot of these tools are probably a bit too technical for the average Power BI user to ever use. But again, if you're thinking about an enterprise Power BI deployment, there will always be some IT department involvement, and they can set up the processes with these new tools that will actually give you some control over versions of reports and things like that.
How often do you use direct query in Power BI projects for your customers?
I do use it. However, I would say that in a lot of cases, people start off using direct query and then subsequently find out that actually they're better off with import mode or using a live connection instead. The problem with direct query is that it promises more than it can really deliver, in that people hear, oh yeah, I don't need to copy the data into Power BI, I can just leave it where it is. And it will just generate queries, and okay, well that sounds like the best possible thing we can do.
Works quite fine if I have only one or two steps in the editor.
Exactly, yes. But then, of course, you find out that actually they've got these complicated reports with, 20 different visualizations on a page with slicers and things. And then, they click on a slicer, 20 different queries, more than 20 different queries get run. And oh look, we've got hundreds of reports, and these are basically all kind of ad hoc queries. How can you tune all of these different queries? For example, can you promise that Power BI is going to generate the most optimal SQL query in the first place? No, no tool would ever do that. So, it's good, it's useful in real-time scenarios, it's useful when you've got very large amounts of data. It's not the answer to all things for everybody that some people initially think. Composite models, a new feature where you can mix direct query mode.
That's my next question.
That is obviously going to make direct query a lot more useful, as is the new aggregations feature as well.
Yeah, exactly. So we are talking about the aggregation feature, that Microsoft introduced. It's a very powerful feature in Power BI.
Exactly, and
you can keep the aggregated data,
Yeah, we can go back again to 1998, where Analysis Services Multidimensional had aggregations to speed things up. Finally, Power BI and Analysis Services Tabular has got the same things. I mean, to be fair, actually, aggregations in Power BI is a bit more like HOLAP rather than ROLAP in Analysis Services Multidimensional. And actually, if you ever used HOLAP in Multidimensional, you realize that there was some fundamental flaws with how it was implemented, which meant that it was totally, completely useless. And the same flaws have been understood and avoided by Microsoft. So aggregations and composite models are a lot more useful, and the implementation is just fundamentally better than ROLAP and HOLAP was in Multidimensional.
Yeah, but currently you can have direct query to show the detailed version of the data set.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. So I think it's that's a very, very exciting development for people who are working with large amounts of data.
Yeah, absolutely. When I first time saw it, I just thought that this feature revolutionized the capabilities in Power BI. Yeah. So it's quite new feature.
Yeah.
Quite recently, during the local group in London, you have been present QA in Power BI. And what's new has appeared in that area?
So Q&A is one of those features that actually for years, for most of my time working with Power BI, I was a bit contemptuous of it. I just thought it was a kind of a bit of a demo feature. And then in the last couple of months, some new features got added, which actually made me stop and think again that maybe Q&A was worth a closer look, or worth me looking at again. So the first thing that happened was, one of the problems I'd always had with Q&A was not the feature, but where it was surfaced. There's been a lot of confusion in Power BI about workspaces and who's building what where. And actually the ways that Q&A was surfaced and made available to the end user meant that actually they weren't really, places that the end user would actually really want to use Q&A. Whereas in the last 6 months, we suddenly got to be able to drop a Q&A button on a report. So a user who is viewing a report and then thinks, I want to find out some more about that data, would be able to click the button, type a question, and then see a visualization that answers their question, which for the first time I think is actually a sensible way of exposing Q&A. So it's kind of useful for end users now in that respect. And then the second thing that happened was that we got the ability to edit the linguistic schema. Now this looks horrendously complicated, and it is, but as soon as you look at it, you realize that it does really extend the possibilities of Q&A and mean that a lot more end user questions can be answered in a meaningful way. It's quite a technical job to do. But then again, as an IT consultant, I always like the more technical, difficult things, because if they're difficult, then my customers will probably need help with them, and I can sell some training and consultancy to them to help them through it. But it's that suddenly really extended the capabilities of Q&A, and so put those things two together. I suddenly thought, well, actually, maybe I shouldn't dismiss it. Maybe it needs a closer look. And the more I looked at it, the more I was actually very, very impressed by it. So I hope Microsoft still keep investing in it. They've been investing in it for a long, long time now. It would be a shame if they lost interest now it's suddenly properly useful. And I would say for anybody that's working with Power BI in an enterprise environment, it probably is now worth your while spending maybe a day just tuning your Power BI dataset for Q&A, maybe creating a separate dataset for Q&A as well, which is specifically tuned, and then giving it to some of your end users and seeing whether they get any value from it.
Yeah.
Because now I've got a suspicion that they might well do.
I've seen this session, as I mentioned, but I'm just wondering if you published that session, or will you presenting that session somewhere?
No,
or you can find it recorded.
I don't think it's recorded anywhere. I've only done it twice now.
Okay.
So I do a lot of conferences and user groups, and every 6 months or so I sit down and think, oh, now everybody's seen all my previous sessions, I've got to write a new session. And it's generally about the cool new thing or something that I'm interested in, and it's just that this autumn I suddenly thought, well, it's time to do a session on Q&A, so it will probably be coming to a user group somewhere near you. But I think it works quite nicely as a session. It's an interesting subject.
Yeah,
and
it was very interesting.
There's a
topic.
surprising amount of technical depth there.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, the second part of the set of the questions, less technical. What hints would you give to young people who wanted to start working on the market, on IT market, for example?
In IT in general? Well, it's an interesting question. It's that whole kind of question of, do you get qualifications?
In Power BI market, if you would like to be more specific.
Oh yeah, so I think that's probably a better question for me to answer. I mean, it does come back down to those fundamental questions of, do you get an academic education, or do you go out and get real world experience? And ultimately you probably need a little bit of both. I think really what you need is enthusiasm and to be interested in what you're doing.
Passion.
Passion, because with IT, however much formal education you get, either from university or from training on the job, or if you're lucky enough to have a mentor at work, somebody to help you, the real way that you learn anything is just working on your own and playing around with things. And I think if you've got passion, if you're interested, if you found something you're interested in, you'll just naturally just want to open up your PC, start playing with it, start doing some fun stuff, and that's the way you learn. That's the way I learn anyway. Quite often I'll find myself in an evening or a weekend thinking about something, or I find some particularly interesting data and I think, oh wow, I'd really like to do a Power BI report on that. And as soon as you do that, it not only helps you learn new skills, it helps you consolidate things that you already think you know, but maybe you don't know very well.
Yeah.
So it's practice. That's what you need to get going in IT. I would also say, well, we're at Data Relay at the moment. You get a lot of benefit from coming to community events and talking to people. In a lot of IT jobs, even if you're not the only person in the IT department, you might be the only person in the IT department who does what you do. Thinking about Power BI, there might only be one person in the company who knows about Power BI and you're the reporting guy. That means that you can't really learn a lot from your colleagues about what you do. And as a result, just the ability to meet people who do the same job as you in other companies, that's going to be really invaluable from a learning point of view, I think.
What do you think? What are the benefits from the community if you're talking to the people at that kind of event like this?
Well, I mean, obviously you get lots of free training from great speakers, and I saw some really good sessions today about things that are kind of relevant to what I do, but which I don't really know anything about. So I learned about temporal tables, learned about Azure Data Factory. These are things that I know exist, but having sat down and watched a really good speaker explain them to me for an hour, I feel actually a lot more confidence that I understand
Absolutely.
what's going on. So the sessions themselves are very good, but also it's just meeting people, networking, hanging around, those chats, before and after sessions over lunch. That's the really important thing. And also, let's face it, anybody in IT, you'll learn only so much in one job. You really learn by going from job to job every couple of years, getting new challenges, new experiences, meeting new colleagues, and the best way I think of getting a new job and progressing in your career is to network, and events like Data Relay are a great place to network. It's where you meet people in your area who do the same thing as you do, who might have a job going, and it's where you can move up on a salary grade, learn some new technology, learn a new business, see some new data, and so on.
I think the same. If you stay at the same company for too many years, basically your career will not develop.
Yeah, exactly. I think I've heard people say that anybody with 20 years IT experience in one company on their CV ends up having actually had 2 years of IT experience and then 18 years of doing the same old thing over and over again, not learning anything new.
What do you think about the MVP those days?
So the Microsoft MVP program.
Yeah.
I've been an MVP now for 12 years, and I am continually very, very grateful for it. It gives me lots of great benefits, like free Azure credits and secret access to NDA materials, which helps me a lot. And I think also from a Microsoft point of view, it's a genius idea by Microsoft to create the MVP program, because it means that it incentivizes people like me to come out and speak at conferences. I mean, I'd probably do this anyway if I wasn't an MVP, because it's something I enjoy doing, and it's to be cynical, it's a good place to meet customers and network. But it's this is, let's face it, a whole load of people giving up their time for free to do marketing and community work for Microsoft. And if you think about how much the MVP program costs Microsoft and how much good it does Microsoft, not just in selling Microsoft products, but making people more successful with what they do with those Microsoft products, which to be honest is what really sells the products. It's the last successful project that sells the Microsoft licenses for the next project. That is absolutely incredibly beneficial for Microsoft, and Microsoft has understood this for a long time, and it runs the program very, very well. So I'm very grateful for what it gives me, but I am full of admiration for how Microsoft uses it for everybody's benefit. It's not like anybody's being exploited. Win-win. Everybody's winning from this. I'm winning, Microsoft's winning, the people here are winning. It's a virtuous circle. So do more of it.
Yeah, and this year basically, I'm not sure if in the whole year, but at least in the UK, a lot of people have not been rewarded.
Yeah. I mean,
how do you think why?
I think, to be honest, there's always kind of inflation in terms of the numbers of MVPs, and there are always some people whose careers change, their personal circumstances change. They've done a lot of great service, but maybe haven't done anything in the previous year. And the thing that Microsoft are always very careful to say about the MVP award is that it's for community work in the previous year. And however good a name you've got, you've always got to think, how much community work have I done in the previous year? So it's inevitable that at some point there will be people that drop out, and I think maybe Microsoft had been quite kind in the past, and this year it was, there's a very high bar that's been set. There are people who do lots of great work. Maybe it's time to thin out the ranks a little bit, give some new people who've done a lot of work an opportunity. I've not come across anybody who's bitter about losing their MVP award. Most of the ex-MVPs that I know have been very grateful for their time, and understand why they weren't rewarded. And it's going to happen to everybody. One year it's going to happen to me. So I just take each year as it comes, and I'm just grateful for what I get.
Yeah, exactly. 20 years. Yeah.
Well, 12 years as an MVP.
12 years.
12 years as an MVP. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow, great. How are you preparing yourself for a speech? You're doing a lot of conferences.
Yeah. So it's an interesting question. I think I do a lot of speaking, and as a result, because I've got a lot of experience speaking, it's changed the way that I prepare for a speech. So when I first started speaking, you would put together a slide deck, and then I would practice it over and over again. Nowadays, I never run through a session until I actually do it. I'll put together a slide deck, and then I just have a gut feeling of roughly how long it will take. Probably prepare more material than I'll need, but then be able to drop things out depending on how the timing's working. And then, I don't know, I feel like any kind of speaking session should be fairly natural, which is why I don't want to prepare too much. I feel like now I can speak to a set amount of time, so long as I have the structure of the presentation prepared and the demos prepared, and I spend a lot of time making sure my demos work.
Well, yeah.
That can be a lot of prep time, and I will always spend at least the hour immediately before a session going over my demos and going over my deck, so I know how everything's structured and how all my demos should work. After that, I feel like I can just fill in the blanks and speak. But it's, I think in a way
it comes with experience.
Yeah, it comes with experience. I think in a way also I found that being an experienced speaker sometimes makes you a bit lazy, and it makes you think you can get away without preparing as well as you should. And as a result, sometimes you don't do as good a job as a speaker as you can, because you've just not bothered to prepare as well. So in the last couple of years, well, maybe a couple of years ago, I found I was doing that a bit too much. And then I decided to, kick myself up the arse and make sure I did properly prepare everything. I don't want to be the person who can, speak and make it look all smooth, but then not really have any good content. I want good content as well.
Yeah, absolutely. There's many conferences or events those days. How often do you speak?
I would say at least once a month at something, possibly more than once. I always like to prioritize events in the UK and events during the week. I travel a lot for my work, and so it's very difficult to justify being away from home at weekends. So I don't actually do that many SQL Saturdays. I prefer to do evening user groups. I do evening user groups in the UK because then I can just take it. I'm self-employed, so I can have a day off, do some admin in the morning, drive to the user group in the evening, do the session. That's fine. If I'm traveling for work, then I will actively look out for local user groups so I can speak. And if I'm away, it's a choice between speaking in a user group or watching movies on my phone in a hotel room on my own. So speaking in a user group is going to be a lot more fun than that.
That's very good news for a lot of leaders of the local user groups.
Well, I'll go out there and ask them. Yes. So
So where do you publish your calendar?
Actually, I've literally only done that in the last month. I've added a page to my blog because it suddenly occurred to me that I probably should list all of the events that I'm speaking at. So after this, 3 days of data relay in Birmingham, Reading and Bristol in the UK. The next thing I've got is I'm doing a remote presentation for the North Carolina user group.
Okay.
I think on the 23rd of October. Then I'm going to do the PASS Summit in the US. Okay. I make exceptions. There are some things that are so important I've got to travel for them. But there's the PASS Summit is obviously the kind of top of the tree for speaking in SQL Server, and if I get accepted, then I'm going to want to go to that. And then after that, I'm doing
December.
a remote session for the Icelandic user group, I think in November as well.
November.
And then I can't remember after that.
Yeah, fine.
Probably SQLBits. No, I'll be going to SQLBits next year. I've just submitted, so hopefully I'll get the speaking slot there.
Yeah, absolutely, you will. So how about your work-life balance? How it works for you?
Well, that's the thing. I mean, being self-employed, there is a delusion of being in control of your own destiny when you're self-employed. What actually happens is that when you're self-employed and you realize you're responsible for bringing the money in and there's nobody else that you can rely on, you're more likely to accept work when somebody offers it to you, which then means you're just more likely to kind of overwork yourself. I mean, the other thing I do is, I travel an awful lot, and you have to offset that as well. So that kind of goes back to what I was saying, trying to avoid doing anything at the weekends, trying to make weekends family time, and also because I'm self-employed and only do these short-term engagements, actually I don't get any work very much in August because everybody's away on holiday. So I just make sure I take pretty much the whole of August off to go on vacation, to spend time with the family. And similarly, there are other times of the year, like the kind of couple of weeks over Christmas, nobody ever does any work, so that's holiday for me. I mean, I suppose if I was to list the number of actual days holiday I have, it's quite generous, but then you count in all of the evenings I spend working, all of the Sunday evenings that I'll be traveling somewhere, so I can be on site to work on a Monday morning. I have a lot of holiday, but I do a lot of work as well.
Yeah, exactly. How it looks like during the week, basically. Yeah. So you have some schedule, like I'm working from 8 to 4 p.m. or
yeah. So it's nothing like that. It's completely all over the place. So for this week, for example, on Monday I was on site with a customer doing some training for them. It's 1 out of 5 days of training, but the 5 days are all split up. So that was about an hour and a half away from where I live. So that was an hour and a half's drive, full day of training, hour and a half's drive home. Then in the evening on a day like that, I'll have to spend at least an hour doing emails, catching up with things, answering people who've asked me about more work. So, got to catch up with those things. Then on Tuesday, I had a half-hour call with a prospective customer at 9:30. Then at 10 o'clock, I was on the phone with another customer for an hour, dealing with a multidimensional NDX problem. Then I went to take my wife to a hospital appointment in the middle of the day. And then when I came back, I had about 45 minutes on the phone with another customer. And then in the evening, it was like, oh, I've got data relay the next day. I'd better look at my slides and practice my demos and things like that. So that was me in the evening. So it's completely non-structured. I don't say that I've got kind of working hours and non-working hours. It all just blurs. Yeah. Unfortunately, which is not a good thing to say.
Yeah, unfortunately. Yeah, but it is what it is. Yeah.
Yeah, it is. And I'm not going to ever complain about the job that I've got. I get a lot of very interesting work. I really enjoy what I do, and I get paid for it as well. So I would never complain about what I do. I'm very, very lucky.
Would you recommend that type of work?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that one of the big downsides is that you're being a single person company. You don't have colleagues, you don't have somewhere to go during the day. There is just you on your own, and sometimes you get a bit lonely. There's no Christmas party, there's no hanging around chatting with people at the water cooler. There are customers I see reasonably frequently, and then I'm friendly with them, but it's not anything like a relationship you would have with a colleague at work, where you're sitting next to somebody all day every day and you can just have a chat with them. When somebody's a customer, you've got a different relationship. You've got to be a little bit more professional. You can't get out your phone and start playing a game or something in the middle of the day. You've got to take lunch when they want to take lunch. So Yeah, it does get a bit lonely, and like I said, also those kind of lonely hotel rooms on a Wednesday night in Copenhagen. You know, when you're there on your own, there's nobody to have dinner with. There's nothing to do but emails. I always make sure I call my family at 7 o'clock every evening when I'm away, so I can at least have a chat with them. But it is quite a hard lifestyle, all the travel and all of the kind of being on your own and always being customer facing.
I heard that sometimes it helps if you go to work to the public places. Did you practice that kind of thing?
No,
sometimes?
because I like a bit of comfort, and if I'm in a public place, I think what it does working in a public place is it puts you on your best behaviour. It means that you concentrate more on work and do less browsing. But actually, I think I'm fairly well disciplined anyway. So I don't have a problem doing the work in the evenings. I always, like I said, end up spending an hour or so, at least an hour or so, doing stuff. But it's just you're doing it on your own. I'd rather be at home with my family rather than in a hotel room on my own.
Yeah. How long do you work on the market as a consultant? When do you start with your company?
So that was 12 years ago when I set up.
12 years.
So I didn't really think too much about it. When I think back to 12 years ago, I probably think, wow, God, I didn't even realise what I was doing. But I was in my last permie job. It was the usual story where a lot of stuff had been offshored, and I'd still got my job, but I wasn't doing, in the future I wasn't going to be doing any hands-on work. I was just going to be writing specs. And, I like the hands-on technical stuff.
Yeah.
So I thought, it's time to go. And I thought, well, I'll just set up a company. I'd already been blogging for a couple of years. So I thought, well, I'll just put something on my blog and say that I'm available to do consultancy work. And if the work comes, then great. If it doesn't, well, I'll just go and get a contract and work for 6 months a year, like contractors normally do. And then in the first month, I had a couple of days of work. It worked out pretty well, and then it just built on from there. So I was just very, very lucky, and I'm glad that it worked out for me. I think it helped that I'd already got my blog, and that allowed me to kind of publicise myself and get the work that way.
Yeah, so you basically haven't planned very well.
No.
You had a blog that you were leading for a couple of years before, but generally you haven't planned it.
Exactly. I mean, I think nowadays you'll go to, well, I think at the PAR Summit this year there'll be a session on building your personal brand, and there are some people, for example, Brent Ozar, who does a great job, a very, very professional job with his personal brand, getting everything. And my marketing efforts are nowhere near as good as that. But at the end of the day, the personal brand doesn't make you any money. It's the work you actually do that makes you money. And the personal brand, any marketing activities you do, ultimately you've got to do enough to drive work to keep you busy. If you spend your whole time making your blog look pretty, or getting some great avatars and things together, or doing podcasts, then you don't have enough time to actually make the money.
Yeah, sure. Maybe this is just another way how to achieve the goal. Yeah, but
exactly.
Also, I don't agree that you don't have the brand. Yeah, you have your blog, and I think your blog is
it's not very slick and professional though. I mean, I think when I look at some people, especially the new generation of people who are doing stuff on YouTube. I mean, I know Adam Saxton guy in the Cube is a Microsoft employee, but his branding, his slickness is so good. And there are lots of other.
Keep publishing 3 times a week.
Yeah,
if I could remember.
exactly.
Wow.
Exactly. But there are lots of other people out there who blog, who do YouTube videos, who do a much slicker job than I do with their personal branding. But again, I kind of see it as a means to it. Maybe I'm just lazy. I'm not very good at making things look, or making YouTube videos, or making kind of nice looking websites or something like that.
I think you are just focusing on the different things.
I just do the things I do. It's worked in the past, and hopefully it'll work in the future. And if I find something interesting, when I'm doing my kind of day-to-day job, I'll blog about it. Yeah, it serves as marketing. It also serves as a way of helping me remember the things that I've learned, because if I didn't write it down in a nice, structured, central, easily searchable way, I'd forget about it, and then the next time somebody asked me the same question, I'd think, oh, I used to know that, but then I'd have forgotten. I am the number one person that hits my blog. I Google for myself several times every day just to look up the stuff that I know I've written down, but I've forgotten otherwise. And quite a lot of the time
comes from
but 50% of the traffic is from me, and a lot of the time I'm Googling for something and I'll find one of my blog posts and I've forgotten I even written about it.
Which is very good.
Yes.
So what is the recipe to achieve the success having own company?
I wish I knew. I think the only recipe that I've got is I do what I do, it works for me, and it's just worked out. So much of it depends on you, your personality, what you enjoy doing, your own particular strengths and weaknesses. A recipe that works for one person probably wouldn't work for anybody else. But I don't know. I mean, there's some standard good business things, which means that if somebody emails me asking about some work, I'm going to hopefully reply to them within 24 hours and get back to them. If somebody wants me to turn up to do some training, I make damn sure that I'm going to turn up and be there on time to do the training and do a professional job. You know, the best way to build a business is to get satisfied customers who then come back to you and give you more business in the future. And it's the same whether you're running an IT consultancy and training business, or whether you're running a restaurant, or whether you're running, anything else. Getting the customers is the hard part. The way you build a business is, get new customers, but also keep the existing customers coming back. If you do a bad job, you're going to be in trouble.
Exactly. So we are perfectly flying to the next question, the last one. Are you perfectionist?
No, actually maybe in some things I'm a perfectionist, but I would say actually in general, no, I am the opposite of perfectionist. I like to find a solution to a problem, but I know in my personal life, if you saw my office at home, it is incredibly messy. I don't spend a lot of time, some people have this perfectly clean, well-organized personal office with 4 screens all arranged for maximum productivity. That's not me. I've got a knackered old office chair. I work off my laptop half the time because it's just easier.
So you don't have any external monitor?
I do, but I don't use it most of the time.
Okay.
I just work off my laptop. I'm surrounded by mess. I know where everything is. I'm one of these kind of mess is creative type people. But I'm not going to, spend time optimizing absolutely everything. Give me an MDX calculation though. You give me a bit of M. I do like to make sure my code is nicely indented. There are a couple of things, especially about MDX, which I've been doing for years, where I like to have my MDX written in a particular way because I know that just works. And it's not just a kind of OCD thing. I've seen lots of cases where people will write something that seems okay, but it's not the way I would have written it. And then it just doesn't work properly, or it doesn't perform well. And then when I write it the way I would have written it, it works well. You then get to the bottom of it and find that actually there was something weird going on in the engine. But I just have a set way of doing things that I like because I know it's worked well in the past. And I'll make sure I do it the way I like it. So not necessarily perfectionism, but
But perfect approach
I
to
like
work.
to do a good job, clean codes, and deliver something that's good quality.
And we can see it during your presentation. Absolutely.
Thank you.
So at the end of our conversation, tell us where we can find you.
So on Twitter, I am CWEBB_BI, and my blog is blog.crossjoin.co.uk, and my website, if you want to hire me for consultancy and training, is www.crossjoin.co.uk. So Crossjoin is CROSSJOIN.
Okay, thank you very much, Chris, for that conversation.
Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you for joining us, listening to this podcast and time spent jointly. You can find this podcast on the website SQLplayer.net. Share this episode if you like it, and let us know if you want to hear a specific person from the SQL community, or maybe about an interesting topic of technology.